Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. So first, let's look at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 7 important articles. Along with this, I'll be covering 3 important updates from PIB as well. So, a total of 10 topics in today's discussion to ensure a comprehensive coverage of current affairs. The idea is to ensure that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. But before we start, I have a very important announcement for those of you who are preparing for 2027 and beyond. Usually, when you start your UPSC preparation, you are generally confused whether to focus on prelims or mains. Accordingly, when you try to look for coaching classes, again you are under a confusion whether to opt only for prelims related classes or mains related classes. Generally, you will have to opt separately for prelims and mains test series as well. So Unacademy is presenting one combined course covering all the required classes for prelims and mains, giving you access to the live and recorded lectures along with access to the prelims and mains test series. This entire subscription is now available at the lowest price of just 16,999, and I'm told the offer ends tonight. And if you enroll within the offer period, you will also get double validity and CSE assure guarantee. Under double validity, let's say you take a 6 month subscription, you get a 6 month free extension, and so on and so forth for 9, 12, and 18-month subscription. So, those of you who are planning to prepare for 2027 and beyond, these subscription plans would be perfect and it would be the lowest entry point for you in terms of the pricing of the subscription. And under CSE Assure, let's say for some reason you don't clear the prelims exam despite your best effort and best attempt. That's where we would like to stay with you, support your next preparation as well. And we will provide a free extension on your subscription if you don't clear prelims in your first attempt. But of course, this is mainly meant for students who are actually putting in the efforts. So we will look at students who have attended classes, taken up enough tests. There will be certain criteria to be met. And those genuine students who put in the effort and despite that didn't clear the prelims, then Unacademy will be with you by giving you a free extension on your subscription. So those interested, please check out the link provided in the description. And to avail this offer, the price of 16,999 with CSE Assure guarantee and double validity, you have to enter the code IAS English. And also please note, to get CSE Assure guarantee, you have to avail a minimum subscription of 2 years and above. So once you enter the code IAS English, you'll be able to avail the discounted price. With this, let's get started and look at the first article. On page number 10, there's a detailed column that helps us understand the topic of barriers to trade. See, in the recent years, India has signed so many free trade agreements. They're all designed primarily to reduce the barriers to trade, particularly tariff based barriers. Over the last couple of years, thanks to Donald Trump and his trade wars, when you look at trade diplomacy, tariffs have been the main obsession of policymakers, the media, and even the common public. They generally believe that only tariffs are the main barriers to trade. This reduces the focus on an equally important barrier to trade, which are your non tariff barriers. So, when you look at trade diplomacy over the past decade, most countries they have largely focused on tackling the tariff barriers, that is to reduce the import duties, the custom duties, and provide for reduced taxation for imports in order to provide easier access to the market of another country. But what doesn't get enough attention is non-tariff barriers, which creates real obstacles in the entry of goods and services into another market. So that is the focus of the article. So first, let's understand, what do you mean by barriers to trade? So when it comes to foreign trade, as far as trade diplomacy is concerned, there are two major types of barriers to trade. You have tariff based barriers and you have non tariff barriers or NTBs. So tariff barriers are quite easier and simpler to understand. Tariff barriers are essentially nothing but your import duties, custom duties, any other form of taxation or tariff that's levied on imports, which also includes countervailing duty, anti-dumping duty in certain cases, right? So such taxation related barriers to the entry of imports into a country, they are referred to as tariff based barriers. Non-tariff barriers are any other barrier to trade which is not related to tariffs. So this primarily includes regulations, government regulations with regard to quality control, with regard to certification and licensing requirements, or it could be based on environmental standards, or it could be related to protection of intellectual property rights. It could also be related to health and hygiene standards, where sanitary and phytosanitary measures can be implemented on the goods that are seeking to enter a country's market to ensure the quality of the product, to ensure that the goods that are entering the market match certain standards, either quality standards, hygiene and safety standards, or health standards, or environmental standards, or intellectual property standards. There can be different set of regulations, certification requirements, licensing requirements, which are placed by respective governments, which becomes a non-tariff barrier. According to the writer, most of the world is obsessed with tariff barriers because that's where the focus of trade diplomacy has been, all because of Trump's trade wars and the media attention that it grabs. But what the world is ignoring is the real impact on trade is coming from non-tariff barriers. Now, when you look at the recent interim trade agreement that India and US announced in February 2026, Trump had previously levied up to 50% tariffs on India, which was slated to be brought down to around 18%. This interim trade deal is yet to be signed. It's yet to be brought into force. It was just a formal announcement that was made. Now, a reduction in tariffs definitely helps ease the movement of goods and services. But however, can this trade agreement be fully utilized? Can the tariff reduction really bring benefits to increase your exports? It depends entirely on non-tariff barriers. See, over the years, we have signed so many free trade agreements with UAE, with Australia, with Oman, with United Kingdom, with the EFTA countries, with New Zealand. India has signed plenty of FTAs. We have FTAs from the previous era as well, with Japan, with the ASEAN countries. But when you look at the actual utilization of the tariff reduction under these FTAs, it's very minimal. Most of the tariff regulations which are reduced, right, the tariff relaxations which are provided, they are not fully utilized because of the existence of non-tariff barriers. Now, these non-tariff barriers, they cover a wide spectrum of trade-related measures. Under WTO, it's even referred to as the technical barriers to trade. Now, let's say when you take products from the pharmaceutical industry, drugs, medicines, etc., there will be certain quality standards. There would be certain licensing requirements which have to be met. Or let's say you take agricultural commodities, maybe fruits, vegetables, or products of animal husbandry, dairy and meat industry. They have to pass through certain hygiene, safety, sanitary standards in order to be allowed entry into other markets. So even if tariffs are reduced, even if duty-free access is given, goods cannot easily enter without overcoming the non-tariff barriers. Now, take for example the India UAE FTA that we have, the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement that was signed in 2022. UAE has almost given duty free access to most of India's exports to the UAE. Just because the tariffs have been brought down to almost zero, or duty-free access has been provided for most of the Indian exports, doesn't mean it will automatically increase our exports into the UAE market. It depends on Indian products meeting the regulatory standards of UAE, the quality standards, the certification standards. If you take meat exports from India to UAE, for example, they would expect halal certification, right? And they may not consider the halal certificate issued by Indian regulators and Indian authorities. They would expect the traders to get them certified again. And this increases the cost of compliance. It delays the movement of the goods and overall brings a heavy cost on trade, which basically deters foreign trade between two sides, even if there is a FTA in place. So, reducing non tariff barriers is very crucial. Today, the world is hyper regulated in a globalized economy. Almost each and every sector, governments are tightly regulating them, and there is an overload of regulations, especially in the last 3 decades since the establishment of the World Trade Organization in 1995 that replaced the GATT. If you look at the number of non-tariff regulations and certification and licensing standards, they have increased exponentially. According to data, non-tariff barriers have surged by 90%, which is a six-fold increase in the last 30 years. In fact, post 2000, more than half of the 20,000 global product and safety regulations that are introduced across the world, they have come in the last 2 to 3 decades. If you take, let's say, the last 70 years of global trade and take all the regulations and safety standards that are in place, more than half of it, there are 20,000 plus such regulations, more than half of it were introduced in just in the last 20 years. If you look at the compliance cost, how it has increased in recent years because countries are becoming more protectionist with regard to their trade policies. You see this general trend against globalization. While tariffs are relaxed, non tariff barriers are brought up to create new hurdles and new gates that keep foreign goods away from their markets. So jumping through these hurdles become a nightmare for traders. It increases their cost for compliance significantly and deters the export into a foreign market. So in 2025 alone, governments across the world have submitted 7,700 notifications for non-tariff barriers, according to WTO's data, which is nearly 10 times more than it was back in 1995 when WTO was first established. So WTO, which was meant to ease global trade and provide a fair trade mechanism, it has seen a significant surge in such non-tariff restrictions, and especially developed countries, they have a number of trade restrictions which block out access to goods coming from developing markets like India. For example, the European Union is one of the most regulated. It has hundreds of standards and restrictions. For example, if you remember, we have been studying about the carbon border adjustment mechanism, which is a type of non-tariff barrier where EU is levying additional import duties depending on the carbon footprint of the product. If the product has contributed to certain emissions, those emissions which would have occurred in a foreign country, in a country like India, they are being taxed by European regulators. Let's say Indian steel exports to European market, right? Steel industry is a polluting industry. It would have contributed to emissions. Those emissions are taxed in the European market if Indian steel has to be exported to Europe. So the importer in Europe has to pay this additional duty, which makes Indian steel less competitive and costlier for import into Europe. So the importers will look at other sources where better environmental standards might be followed. So to levy such standards on developing nations like India would essentially transfer the burden of historical emissions on developing nations. It goes against the very spirit of climate change negotiations and the Paris Agreement. If you look at the EU deforestation regulation, it takes into account the deforestation footprint of a product And accordingly, EU levies additional duties on these products, becoming another non-tariff barrier. In the EU market, if you look at agricultural imports, medical imports, that is pharma and drugs and vaccines, there are very high quality standards, stringent hygiene safety standards which have to be passed. They don't accept the lab reports and the certifications issued in India. So traders have to jump through multiple hoops to get their products into the European market. Even if there is a FTA, it would create a lot of hurdles. Now, India EU have recently signed an FTA earlier this year, which might take effect in few more months or probably by next year. Even with that FTA in place, these compliance requirements, the regulatory requirements will stay in place. They will create fresh hurdles. So when you look at the total goods entering the European market, 94% of those imports, they have to pass through very stringent regulations. When you look at this number for United States, out of the total imports into US, 77% of the imports pass through very strict non-tariff restrictions. Even India is stepping up its regulations. Nearly 45% of the total imports that enter our country has to pass through these technical barriers to trade and non-tariff barriers to trade. See, India is stepping up regulation mainly to create a trade barrier to prevent some of the foreign goods, to reduce our dependency on foreign imports, so that it can disincentivize foreign imports into our economy and create an incentive for domestic industry to produce them. But eventually, non-tariff barriers such as these regulations, right, or certification and licensing requirements, they become a major hurdle for foreign trade. Now, when you look at India's experience with existing FTAs, if you look at the India ASEAN FTA, which went into force in 2010, the trade in goods agreement under the India ASEAN FTA came into force in 2010. Since then, Indian industries have faced many technical hurdles to enter the Southeast Asian markets. Now, take for example, Indonesia. Indonesia can be a good market for our pharma industry. India is considered as the pharmacy of the world, one of the world's largest exporter of vaccines and generic drugs. But they are struggling to enter the Indonesian market because of strict licensing and regulatory requirements that are expected, which is very hard for small Indian pharma companies to overcome. Similarly, if you look at Thailand, Thailand has such strict custom related regulations on gems and jewelry imports that Indian gems and jewelry products are being diverted to Hong Kong. From Hong Kong, it's being brought into Thailand, increasing the cost of transportation, increasing the compliance cost, delaying the movement of the goods, thus affecting the Indian gems and jewelry industry. So though there is a FTA in place between India and ASEAN, these requirements are creating real challenges, practical hurdles for Indian exports to gain market access in Southeast Asia. So our actual utilization of FTAs is very low. According to studies, India's FTA utilization rate is just around 25%. If you look at the FTA we have with Japan, back in 2011, the then Manmohan Singh government had signed the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. So though there is a FTA with Japan, Indian drugs, they struggle to enter the Japanese market because of stringent regulations. For example, Japan does not accept the quality certification issued by Indian regulators and authorities. And this creates a big hurdle for small Indian pharma companies to access the Japanese market. Even with South Korea, we have a limited trade agreement. We are in the process of negotiating a full-fledged free trade agreement. Even then, Indian goods, they struggle to enter the South Korean market. So you find this challenge with most of the current FTAs that we have. So though they provide duty-free access or reduced tariffs, that alone will not solve the problem unless and until the non-tariff barriers are addressed. However, there is some hope, because some of the recent FTAs that we have worked out, they have much better provisions in this regard. If you look at the 2022 SEPA, the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement between India and UAE, in this FTA, not only both sides are providing almost duty-free access to almost all their exports, they are also providing for recognition of global certificates and mutual standards recognized by their respective national authorities. For example, UAE has now started accepting the halal certificate issued by Indian regulators, which was not being done previously. This significantly reduces the compliance burden on Indian meat exporters. So, both sides have started accepting certification and licensing requirements met through global standards and organizations. And they're even accepting that some of their mutual certificates and licensing requirements, which significantly reduces the compliance burden. Even if you look at the TEPA, the Trade and Economic Partnership Agreement that India signed with EFTA countries, the European Free Trade Association, that comprises of 4 European countries: Norway, Switzerland, Iceland, and Liechtenstein. This trade agreement provides a legally binding commitment on both sides to accept and recognize the certificates and licenses issued mutually. So going forward, as EFTA has taken effect from 2025 onwards, it has come into force from last year. Certificates, licenses issued by Indian regulators and authorities will be accepted by EFTA customs, and they'll not block those goods and provide easier access to them. So they will mutually recognize and accept each other's laboratory testing certificates and licensing requirements, reducing the compliance cost significantly. So it provides for a legally binding obligation. It also streamlines the entire conformity norms that are required. They have even set up a subcommittee, a dedicated committee to assess these non tariff barriers and to tackle them in real time. So, India and EFTA countries have constituted a subcommittee to keep monitoring these non tariff barriers, and any such barriers posing a hurdle to trade can be dealt with immediately with the help of this assessment committee. So, such prioritization of non tariff barriers is necessary to ensure the success of free trade agreements. So that is the key lesson for us. In any FTA, in any trade negotiations, in trade diplomacy, tariffs need not be the only obsession. There should be equal focus on non-tariff barriers as well. That's how you better utilize a free trade agreement. So please take up this mains practice question based on what we have discussed and practice your answer writing. Now let's move to the next article. There's an editorial on page number 10 that focuses on cough syrups produced in India. Cough syrups are widely abused in our country, right? The moment people develop any respiratory congestion or even the slightest of symptoms of cough, we tend to rush to the nearest pharmacist. Without going to a doctor, we either self medicate or we treat the pharmacist as our doctor, right? That's the harsh reality in India. Across the country, we consider the pharmacist to be our first point of contact. And we ask the pharmacist to recommend medicines and drugs and even syrups. So one of the most widely abused drug is cough syrups. It's comparable with other medicines like antibiotics, for example, or popping Dolo every now and then. So consuming cough syrup is widely common across the country, and this is extremely hazardous. Recently, the health ministry has brought a restriction that it is no longer an over the counter medicine. You can't simply go to a medical store anymore and buy cough syrups. Certain category of cough syrups are being banned for OTC sales. You can't just order it over the counter. You need a doctor's prescription. Now, why did the government bring in this regulation? Why now? Why wasn't this done before? See, this is not primarily to reduce the abuse of cough syrups and to protect public health. Of course, that is one of the objectives, but there is something else which is happening. The Indian pharmaceutical industry has suffered a significant setback in its global image in recent years. Because, see, cough syrups, if the right quality standards and safety standards are not maintained, and if it is blatantly abused, there is a very high risk that it can become highly toxic, especially for young children. In the last few years, many deaths have occurred amongst children, which are linked with Indian cough syrup consumption. Take, for example, what happened in African countries like Gambia, or in Central Asian countries like Uzbekistan, or more recently within India in Madhya Pradesh, where 20 plus children lost their lives as they were administered a spurious cough syrup which had become toxic and contaminated. Even WHO issued warnings to several countries to be cautious while using Indian cough syrups. See, India positions itself as the pharmacy of the world, one of the world's largest producer of generic drugs and vaccines, and especially the global south is our biggest market. Pharma exports is a key part of our overall exports, and countries in Africa, countries in Latin America, developing underdeveloped nations across Asia, these global south countries are the biggest market for our pharma exports. So such incidents and WHO warnings, they affect India's image, and it can directly hit our pharma exports. See, the reason is cough syrups, they contain a toxic industrial solvent. They might be contaminated with diethylene glycol, which is often used in brake fluid and as an antifreeze agent in industrial applications. Improper preparation and the lack of safety and quality norms in small pharmaceutical companies could result in contamination of the cough syrup with ethylene glycol and diethylene glycol. When this is consumed, especially for young children whose respiratory systems may not have still well developed, this could result in very severe, serious complications. See, generally, cough suppressants, they are made up of bronchodilators, and it's basically a cocktail. It's a mixture of a number of medical pharmaceutical ingredients. It has bronchodilators, it has antihistamines, and decongestants, right? But when it is administered without medical supervision, without the supervision of a professional doctor, this can induce heart palpitations. It can play with blood pressure, right? It can lead to body tremors, and it can immediately put a stress on the respiratory system and the cardiovascular system, resulting in the death of the person as well. Especially for young children, the risk associated with cough syrups is very, very severe. That's why India has removed the term syrup itself from Schedule K of Drug Rules 1945. And now any cough medicine requires a doctor's prescription and cannot be sold over the counter. So the government is trying to tackle the demand side of the problem, but it's failing to understand that these cases come up because of the supply side issues where pharma companies are bypassing safety and quality norms. They're not testing the contaminated samples. They're not following the safety and quality standards. So you can't tackle this problem by addressing the demand for cough syrups in the market. Yes, there has to be greater awareness amongst the public not to rely on cough syrups. Even doctors strictly advise against using cough syrups. It has to be prescribed by a doctor only for certain specific cases, right? You can't simply go and buy cough syrup and start drinking it as if it's a juice, right? Doesn't work like that. It is known to have very serious effects, causing body tremors, palpitations, impacting your blood pressure, and can even become fatal under the right circumstances. Especially for children, it's very, very hazardous. So, the government of India, instead of tackling the supply side problem, which is the quality issue of these syrups, it is trying to address the demand side of the problem, where OTC buying was possible, where you could simply buy cough syrups from the pharmacist. Yes, this regulation is necessary in the interest of public health to keep Indians safe and to ensure cough syrups are not abused. But still, that will not address the quality and the safety problem associated with Indian cough syrups, right? If the government is serious about protecting its image as the pharmacy of the world, if it has to protect these markets in Africa and in global south countries, then we need to strictly enforce the safety and quality norms, right? Right now, the pharma industry gets away with an argument that if they try to comply with higher safety and quality norms, the cost increases for them. Now, you can't compromise safety for the sake of profits, right? So that's where you need a strict enforcement of the pharmacopoeia standards, the drug standards that are present in the country. The state drug regulators, the state level drug controllers, they are not adequately staffed. They don't have sufficient manpower at the inspectorate level. So you need to ensure that adequate resources are available with state drug controllers to enforce existing quality norms and safety standards. You need to address the supply side of the problem. Yes, it is good that cough syrup selling over the counter is being banned. It has to be sold only with a doctor prescription, correct? But this alone will not solve this entire problem. It will not correct India's image. That will happen only when we address the supply side issue, which is the quality and safety issue, which is being bypassed by the smaller pharmaceutical companies in the country. So that is what we learned from this editorial. So please take up this mains question for your answer writing practice. Now, moving on, we have two important articles related to the same topic. The Telegram ban that the government of India has placed on the popular messaging platform. Recently, the Ministry of Electronics and IT has placed a temporary ban. I'm sure all of you must already be facing difficulties in accessing Telegram, right? It has been taken offline. The internet service providers, they have been directed by the Ministry of Electronics and IT under the powers of the IT Act and the IT rules to block access to Telegram services until the 22nd of June. The government has said this drastic measure was necessary to protect the sanctity of the upcoming NEET re-exam. Right? I'm sure all of you must have seen the big scandal involving the leak of question papers. And the government says the leak is mainly happening, or fake leaked papers are being sold through Telegram channels where parents and prospective students are being contacted by these mafias who are looking to make quick profits by trying to sell fake questions as leaked question paper of the NEET exam. So the government's argument is that to prevent any confusion, to prevent such extortion activities, there's a ban that is necessary to block this entire communication channel. And the government has said this is a temporary ban which will be lifted once the NEET exam is over. But however, this raises some very troubling questions, legal and constitutional questions involving fundamental rights. It raises questions about the IT Act and the IT rules and the stringent powers that the government enjoys under these laws. So Telegram has not only criticized the move, it has challenged this decision. It has approached the Delhi High Court with a petition arguing that the ban is unconstitutional. The government is defending itself by equating Telegram with the dark web. The government has argued in the Delhi High Court the Telegram is like the new dark web. That's why it has to be regulated and banned for a certain period when there is a threat to public order. Now, first, let's understand what is the dark web. It's a key concept in internal security. And then we'll understand the legal and constitutional argument related to IT Act and IT rules. Now, when you look at the larger internet, the internet is made up of different layers, right? The publicly accessible pages on the internet is largely on the surface, which is easily accessible. So all your social media platforms, your search engines, and whatever we access freely, right? They constitute the surface web, but it's only a small fraction, a tiny fraction of what the actual internet is. Majority of the internet remains hidden, concealed. So this hidden part of the internet is called the deep web. Hidden because of privacy reasons, for reasons of confidentiality. For example, see this class which is happening on YouTube, which is a free platform, it's happening on the surface web. But let's say a class on Unacademy Plus, where only paid subscribed students have access to it, right? You need a proper login. You need to have subscribed to the courses. So it exists on the deep web, or your legal documents, your medical records, wherever paid subscription is involved, or wherever legal research documents are involved, right? Personal documents are involved. Most of the data is present on the deep web, wherever there's a paywall present, wherever limited access is provided only to authorized individuals. This is all part of the deep web, which is a hidden part of the internet to ensure confidentiality, to ensure privacy and safety. But within layers of deep web, we have another dark underbelly of the internet called the dark web. The dark web is a deliberately concealed part of the internet with very high levels of encryption. A normal individual cannot access the dark web. A normal person like you and me, we can access the surface web. We can even access the deep web if we have the right access and credentials. But accessing the dark web requires technical skills and certain technical equipment as well. For example, you would require the Tor network. You should know how to access the Tor network or the onion router. It's called the onion router because it refers to the layers and layers of encryption that protects the dark web. Just like how an onion is made up of several layers, right? You peel one outer layer, it reveals another inside layer. Similarly, the dark web is concealed with multiple layers of encryption. To access the dark web, you need special routers, you need special skills, you need to know how to get into the dark web. And this dark underbelly of the internet can grant you complete anonymity due to high levels of encryption. You can virtually become anonymous, conceal your location, your identity, even your IP address. You're almost untraceable on the dark web. So, as a result, the dark web is blatantly misused by organized criminal cartels. On the dark web, you have all kinds of illicit activity taking place, from drug trafficking to even arms trafficking. Even rocket and missile components are sold on the dark web. Then all the data that is stolen through cyber attacks and cyber crimes are sold on the dark web, right? They sell it to the highest bidder. All the crypto illegal transactions take place on the dark web with complete anonymity. Even extremist groups, terrorist organizations communicate on the dark web as it guarantees them immunity. It guarantees them that anonymity where they conceal their identity, location, and IP address. So it's essentially a hub of all criminals, extremists, and all illicit activities can occur. Even the uh, transfer and sale of child pornography takes place on dark web, right? So all horrific crimes are enabled through the dark web. That's why most police, law enforcement, and even intelligence agencies maintain a presence on the dark web. So equating Telegram with the dark web is a reference to the extent to which Telegram has been misused. So the government is partially correct when it argues in the court that Telegram is like the new dark web, because I'm sure you must have seen on Telegram there are a lot of spam channels, spam accounts. You often get spammed with uh, fraudulent messages. It has become a hub of cyber scams and cyber frauds. If you look at the investment scams or the crypto scams or the romance scams which are pulled off by cyber criminals, they mainly communicate and contact their victims through channels like Telegram. It offers high level end to end encryption, and the very features of the platform is designed in such a way that it enables illicit activities to take place, right? So, yes, the government is correct to be concerned, to be worried about the misuse of channels like Telegram. But, however, a targeted ban just on Telegram for the sake of one examination, it defies all logic. Because let's say government is arguing that there are miscreants who are claiming that they have the leaked NEET papers and they're trying to entice parents and students to pay money in order to create confusion and cast doubts about the credibility of the examination process itself. So this is not just the government avoiding its responsibility for ensuring the safety and sanctity of the exam process. It's also government shifting blame to just one platform. Don't you think those miscreants can use other platforms? Telegram is not the only platform. They can use WhatsApp, or there are so many other communication platforms today. Much of it is not under proper government regulation. At least Telegram is more well known. There are many other smaller applications through which similar exchange of messages could happen. So it defies all logic as to why the government has placed a blanket ban, that to a complete ban on the platform itself. When government already has existing powers to regulate the content, instead of using those limited surgical provisions, it's using a sledgehammer like approach, crushing the entire platform for days together, which could affect millions of its genuine users in the country. For example, many of you who would regularly take up the daily quiz after the Hindu news analysis session on our Telegram channel, you're not able to access it because the government has banned it. Imagine so many content creators, influencers, educators. They all depend on Telegram to communicate with their audience. So the government is hitting at their livelihood, their ability to earn through their profession, which goes against the fundamental rights guaranteed under Article 19. See, to invoke this ban, the government is relying on Section 69A of the IT Act. Under Information Technology Act 2000, Section 69A allows the government to block any form of communication sent through computer devices, through the internet, if it poses a threat to India's sovereignty and integrity, if it threatens the defense of the country, the security of the state, if it affects foreign relations, the friendly foreign relations of the country, or if it threatens to disrupt public order, or if it can result in incitement to a cognizable criminal offense. On these specific grounds, on these specific grounds, under Section 69A, electronic communication can be blocked. Government can even direct internet service providers and telecom service providers to block access to these platforms, right? But however, blanket use of these provisions can go against Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause A and Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause G. This is where you have to understand this in detail. See, Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause A deals with your freedom of speech and expression. Your right to free speech gets curbed when Section 69A of IT Act is invoked without valid grounds. And your fundamental right to practice a trade or a profession or a business of your liking can be curbed when such a blanket ban is placed, which violates Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause G. Now, this is where we should look at the observations of the Supreme Court with regard to this matter in the Anuradha Basin case. It's a landmark case where Supreme Court of India laid down a three-step process to determine the ban on internet-based platforms. The Anuradha Basin case was with regard to the blanket internet ban in Jammu and Kashmir during the abrogation of special status of J&K under Article 370. So in the Anuradha Basin case, the petitioner argued that the blanket ban on internet, though government said it was on security grounds, in the interest of national security, public order, etc., it affected the fundamental right of the people to pursue their trade, to express their free speech and communication, or to conduct their business and their profession, which affects their earning and livelihood. So in the Anuradha Basin case, the Supreme Court laid down the proportionality test. What is the proportionality test? The Supreme Court mandated that any restrictions that government seeks to place on the internet, it should be proportional to the threat. Meaning the government should use minimum restriction that's necessary, not maximum restriction. So blanket bans are not constitutional as per the Supreme Court of India. If there is a specific threat, let's say a particular platform is a threat to national security, or a particular message or a specific content on the internet is a threat to public order, only such content can be taken down. The action should be proportionate to the threat. You can't place blanket bans, ban the entire platform, or shut off internet without any valid reason. The proportionality test has to be met. The minimum restriction method has to be used, and any decision is open to judicial review. This is what the Supreme Court had laid down in the Anuradha Basin case. So Telegram is now hoping that on these grounds it can argue that the government's ban, even though it's a temporary ban, that it is unconstitutional. It goes against what the Supreme Court had laid down in Anuradha Basin case. Now, please understand the government already had sufficient powers under Section 79 and IT rules. Section 79 of IT Act provides for the safe harbor provision where IT platforms, internet based companies like Telegram and others, they have legal immunity. They can't be held legally liable and they can't be criminally prosecuted for third party content which is hosted on their platforms. Right? So, this is a legal protection that India had offered to tech and IT companies to promote the IT industry. But recently, the IT rules of 2021 allows the government to revoke the safe harbor provision if they don't comply with the new guidelines on social media and intermediaries code. Under the new IT rules of 2021, the government can issue takedown orders, block specific content that is harmful in public interest. So let's say the government detected some Telegram channels where miscreants were claiming to sell the leaked NEET papers. Those channels could have been blocked. Telegram would have cooperated, and the Ministry of Electronics and IT and concerned stakeholders, they could have issued the takedown orders. But instead, banning the entire app is disrupting the service to its 150 million users in India. Several creators, influencers, educators depend on Telegram for their trade, for their profession, for their business, which is a source of earning for them. So you are taking away the right to carry out a trade or a business or a profession of your liking, which goes against fundamental rights guaranteed under Article 19. So that is the key point that we take away from this article. Now, moving on, we have some quick updates. On page 17, there's an article referring to the double contribution convention between India and United Kingdom. See, there are a lot of Indian companies that carry out operations in United Kingdom. Up to 900 Indian companies, they have their business operations in UK. They employ a lot of Indian workers on a temporary basis, around 75,000 Indian workers. They are sent by Indian companies to work in the United Kingdom. Usually, they are sent for 3 to 5 years or sometimes a little more than 5 years. So, when workers are sent on a temporary basis to a foreign country, right, to work on behalf of a company for a few years, it raises a big question about their social security. Now, for example, let's say you're employed in India, right? Your company is making a regular contribution and there's a equal deduction happening from your salary as well into the PF account. Now, when you go abroad, what will happen to your social security contribution? Will this company make a contribution in India or in the other country? Because that country will also have a legal requirement. In India, it's mandatory for the salaried employees to have social security where the company contributes a part of your PF and there is an equal deduction from your salary as well. So, when a temporary worker is sent to another country, there is a risk of double deduction. Since the company is obliged under the laws of both the countries, it will end up paying PF here as well and end up paying PF there as well. Eventually, what will happen? The workers may not be able to draw the benefits because generally PFs will accrue over a period of time only when there is consecutive contribution for 10 years or more. Lesser than that, you can't draw any benefits. You can't even withdraw the amount sometimes. So many times temporary workers who work for 3 or 2 or 4 years abroad, when they come back, whatever PF contribution was made in the other country, they can't withdraw that. They lose access to that and the companies bear the cost, resulting in a double loss. It's a loss for Indian companies, it's a loss for Indian workers as well. That's why we work out social security agreements or double contribution convention where the double payment on social security can be avoided. So previously, under the social security agreement signed in last year, there was a relaxation provided for those who were sent to work on a temporary basis for up to 3 years. Let's say an Indian company like TCS, Infosys, they send Indian workers to UK. If they are sending them for 3 years, up to 3 years, they need not make any social security contribution in UK. They will continue to make the PF contribution in their Indian salary account, which means only one deduction is happening and the employee can come back to India and get the benefits of that social security, right? So this was a significant saving for the company as well, for the employee as well. But now UK has been revising some of its rules because see, most Indian workers, as I said, who are sent on a temporary basis, on an average, they work for 5 years in UK. So 3-year exemption was not enough. It was not addressing the problem. Last year, we have signed a free trade agreement. India, UK have signed comprehensive economic trade agreement, which is all set to take effect from July 15th. So this social security agreement has been revised. It has been upgraded. Now UK has agreed to India's demand to increase the limit to 5 years. So temporary workers sent to UK for up to 5 years. The companies are not obliged to pay social security in UK, right? This could save up to $500 million for Indian companies and for Indian employees. So when Indian workers come back to India, they will not lose that PF amount. They'll be able to access that. Because if that money was deposited in UK, right, after 5 or 6 years of work, you can't really withdraw that. It will not really bring any benefits as well. Minimum 10-year consecutive contribution is required. So this can result in significant savings for Indian companies and as well as for Indian workers. Next, with regard to Strait of Hormuz, the US-Iran MOU, which was signed yesterday, has one troubling provision about the Hormuz Strait. Remember, I explained this topic in the previous sessions as well. We have done a separate video on the topic as well. So as per the MOU, both Iran and US have agreed to lift the current blockade at Hormuz, correct? They have agreed to facilitate free shipping. But however, there is a condition here. It applies only for a 60-day period till the final deal, the actual peace deal covering Iran's nuclear program is worked out. Only up till 60 days, Iran has agreed to lift the blockade and allow for passage of vessels with no cost or toll being levied on them. After 60 days, according to the MOU, US has allowed Iran to work with Oman to work out a transit arrangement for ships passing through Hormuz. So there's every possibility that after the 60-day period, Iran might consider imposing a toll on ships if they have to get safe passage through Hormuz Strait. It might try to implement such a mechanism by working with Oman, as these two countries share their territorial waters at the strategic choke point. Now, when you look at Hormuz Strait, which is hardly around 21 miles at its narrowest point, here we have the territorial waters of Iran. You also have the territorial waters of Oman. So generally, before the war began, ships would pass through the central channel, avoiding the territorial waters of both Iran and Oman. Because here ships can exercise freedom of navigation, right? Freedom of navigation is a guaranteed right under UN clause when you're navigating through international waters. But when it comes to territorial waters, freedom of navigation can be restricted. But however, as per UN clause, if you can prove innocent passage, ships can exercise a right to innocent passage even through territorial waters of a country. See, according to UN clause, territorial waters extend up to 12 nautical miles from the baseline. So in territorial waters, a country has full jurisdiction. It can block the entry of any vessel, commercial vessel or military vessel. But however, if a ship claims that it's just passing through innocently for transit purposes, if it can prove that it's not posing a threat to the security and safety of that country, the country should ideally allow innocent passage as per UN clause provisions. Now, before the war, ships were generally passing through the international waters present over here, and sometimes they would seek innocent passage from Iran or Oman and pass through territorial waters of these countries as well. Now, what happens? This strait has been heavily mined. Iranian Navy and IRGC, they have deployed multiple mines, especially in the central channel, in order to prevent the movement of any vessel. Mines, they detonate on pressure triggered by the movement of a vessel, right? It poses a big safety risk for navigation across the Strait of Hormuz. Some of the vessels which bypassed the blockade, they basically hugged Iran's coastline or Oman's coastline, passing through territorial waters of these countries after taking explicit permission from them. Now, going forward, let's say for 60 days, free passage is allowed with no additional toll or charges. Even then, the central channel cannot be used. Why? Because mines have been laid here by Iranian security forces. The central channel remains very, very dangerous for shipping. It will take months and years of effort to demine these waters. You need specialized demining vessels to detect and pick up and neutralize the mines which have been laid over here. Or else, ships will always face a big risk, right? You can't risk the lives of seafarers. So, unless and until the central channel is demined, ships will rely on territorial waters of Iran and Oman. And that is where the next risk comes up. If Iran and Oman come up with a new control system and levy taxes to use their territorial waters, this could increase the cost of shipping significantly. This could set a new precedent, and this model could be followed across other choke points. For example, at Malacca, Singapore might start charging similar tolls. Right now, Singapore earns revenue through its port facilities located near Malacca. But Singapore doesn't levy any toll or additional cost for ships to navigate through Malacca Strait. Neither does Malaysia nor Indonesia. But this could set a new precedent where countries might start taxing choke points and making money out of it, which can significantly increase the cost of shipping and cost of transportation. That is the risk flagged by this article. Now, coming to the prelim section, let's take a quick look and then we'll look at the PIB articles. On page 12, there's a detailed article on Nipah virus and why Kerala is so vulnerable to repeated outbreaks of Nipah. In the last 10-15 years, Kerala has seen multiple outbreaks, especially in the April to September season. Right now, in northern parts of Kerala, in Malappuram and other northern parts closer to Western Ghats, a lot of outbreaks have come up, and given the high fatality rate, it represents a major health risk, and a number of people often lose their lives to Nipah infections. So, what is Nipah? What's the risk posed by Nipah, and why Kerala is vulnerable for regular repeated outbreaks, especially between April to September? Understanding this can be very important for the prelims exam. See, Nipah was first detected back in 1998 in Southeast Asia, specifically in Malaysia. It's named after a place in Malaysia, just around 1 hour from Kuala Lumpur. You have this rural part of Malaysia. It's actually closer to Malacca as well. So there you have a place called Nipah, where the first initial outbreak was reported. So from here, Nipah outbreaks have been seen in Southeast Asian and South Asian region. Outbreaks have regularly occurred in Bangladesh, in West Bengal, in Kerala. Recently, outbreaks have been reported in Philippines as well. Cases have been reported in Singapore. These countries are the most affected. So Nipah virus is a zoonotic virus, meaning it's capable of making a jump. It's mainly found in animals, right? And it's found in the zoonotic world, but it can jump to humans, and then human to human transmission is also possible. The main reservoir of Nipah virus are the fruit bats. Fruit bats of the Pteropodidae family are considered to be the natural host of Nipah virus. So when humans come in contact with infected fruit bats, or their blood, their bodily fluids, excreta or urine, or their decomposing bodies, or half eaten fruits by these bats, if it is consumed by humans, especially children, right? As they go hunting for fruits, they might pick up fruits that have already been half eaten by the fruit bats without knowing they might consume that. But that fruit would be contaminated with Nipah virus, and thus it will make a zoonotic jump to humans. So, this is the transmission route, mainly jumping from fruit bats who come in contact with its bodily fluids, right? Or those who consume the half-eaten fruits by these fruit bats, and then human-to-human transmission can also occur. It results in very high fever. It can impact respiratory function, causes confusion as well, and the fatality rate is extremely high in the 40 to 75% range. There is no specific cure, no vaccine available for Nipah. WHO has a very high alert level against these endemic outbreaks, right? It's not an epidemic, it's not a pandemic, it's a limited endemic specific to certain regions. So, why does it occur only in some parts of Malaysia, some parts of Kerala, some parts of West Bengal, some parts of Bangladesh? Why does it concentrate only in these areas? See, there are a number of demographic, environmental, and climatological factors that play a role in the outbreak of Nipah. And Kerala has that right combination. See, first of all, Kerala is home to Western Ghats, a biodiversity hotspot, right? And it has very, very high population density as well, which means there is a higher chance of humans coming in contact with fruit bats. In northern parts of Kerala, towards the Western Ghats belt, at the foothills of Western Ghats as well, you find fruit bat colonies along with human habitations. So the chance of human animal interaction is very, very high. Plus, the weather condition, April to September season is essentially the monsoon season, beginning with May, June onwards. So with heavy rain in the Western Ghats belt, there is a greater, easier availability of fruits, which the bats will start feeding. The bat population will explode, and half-eaten fruits are lying around, which the children might consume. Or due to increase in bat population, humans, even adults, might come in contact with the urine or excreta or the blood or the decomposing body of fruit bats, thus contracting the infection. It's a mix of these demographic, environmental, and climatological factors which makes Kerala so prone and vulnerable to repeated Nipah outbreaks. That's why Kerala needs a well prepared epidemiological healthcare system. WHO keeps warning Kerala and countries like Philippines and Malaysia, which are prone to Nipah outbreaks. Kerala has one of the best epidemiological monitoring systems in the country to detect outbreaks at the initial stages, to quarantine the patients, to carry out contact tracing, right? But despite the best efforts, cases keep recurring, and the fatality rate being high will result in several unfortunate deaths. So that is what you need to remember about the Nipah virus and why Kerala is so prone and vulnerable. Next, another type of disease, outbreak in Assam of Japanese encephalitis. Several deaths have been reported because of Japanese encephalitis outbreak, which can cause acute encephalitis syndrome. So, Japanese encephalitis is one of the causing factors which can cause acute encephalitis syndrome. So, please remember, not all cases of acute encephalitis syndrome is caused by Japanese encephalitis. But Japanese encephalitis is one of the causes which can lead to acute encephalitis syndrome. So, what is Japanese encephalitis? It's a viral infection caused by Japanese encephalitis virus, a flavivirus, which is, of course, linked with mosquitoes. Mosquitoes are the primary vectors. It's closely linked with dengue and other mosquito borne diseases, including yellow fever, West Nile viruses, etc. They all fall into the same bracket, right? The flavivirus family. Now, this mosquito borne virus mainly affects developing countries, tropical countries. Asian countries are the most affected by Japanese encephalitis. So, here as well, the mortality rate is quite high in the range of 30%. And upon infection, the individual can develop high fever, stiffness of the neck, severe body ache. It can go on to affect the nervous system and the brain function as well, causing behavioral impact, neurological impact, and eventually it can lead to inflammation of the brain, leading to acute encephalitis syndrome, which could become a fatal condition. So there is no specific cure for the disease, and the highest burden is primarily in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and also in the Western Pacific region, especially in some small islands in the Pacific, and as well as in Southeast Asian and East Asian countries, in South Asian countries like India and Bangladesh. Japanese encephalitis is quite common, primarily affecting children of younger age. There is a vaccine available. There are effective, safe vaccines available to prevent it. Now, can you find out, does India administer this vaccine as part of the free national immunization program, as part of Mission Indradhanush? Does the government include this vaccine against Japanese encephalitis? Please let me know in the comments below. So this is Japanese encephalitis. Now coming to the PIB section, 3 important articles. Let's take a quick look and then we'll wrap up the session for today. Prime Minister Modi has condoled the passing away of a well-known Buddhist philosopher and professor, Mr. Robert A.F. Thurman. He's an American Buddhist scholar, a well-known teacher and professor of Buddhist studies. He has translated some famous Buddhist works, such as the Tibetan Kangyur. He translated the Vimalakirti Sutra, and he is widely regarded as an authority in Buddhist studies. He is also the father of popular Hollywood actress Uma Thurman. So he is considered as an Indic scholar, well known in Indian circles. He had met Prime Minister Modi a few years ago as well, when PM Modi was visiting United States. So PM Modi has condoled his death. Now, given UPSC's propensity to ask very factual and current affairs based questions, knowing such topics could be important because this is linked with India's Buddhist heritage. It's a part of our Buddhist diplomacy as well, right? So being aware of such topics could be relevant for the prelims exam. Next, the Bharat BuildCon Expo 2026 has begun with the theme One Nation, One Expo. What is Bharat BuildCon? It's essentially a conference of building and construction companies and building materials. It brings together some of the leading firms in the world of construction and building, be it ceramic, be it sanitary ware, furniture, electrical components, all the hardware that's required in construction sector, right? And this is a major industry in any country. So India holds the Bharat BuildCon, which is an expo from where these private companies from across the world, construction and building material companies, they come together, and India organizes this event periodically, right? Focusing on building materials. So just know the theme and the focus of the BuildCon, the Bharat BuildCon conference. Coming to the last press release from Defense Ministry, there is a military exercise in news known as Conquest. Conquest is a multilateral military exercise organized by Mongolia. Initially, it was just a bilateral exercise between US and Mongolia, started back in 2003. The US Army used to train with Mongolian armed forces, and it was just a bilateral exercise back in 2003. Later on, it was upgraded to a multilateral exercise, with Mongolia inviting many other like-minded partner countries to take part in the Conquest exercise. Now, India is also a regular participant. This is the 23rd edition of Conquest. It was turned into a multilateral exercise in 2006. Since then, it has been a regular event focusing on UN peacekeeping operations. So Indian Army has sent a battalion of the Jat Regiment with other units of the Indian Armed Forces taking part in this multilateral exercise where several armed forces from across the world participate in exercise Conquest. The main focus is on Chapter 7 of the UN Charter, focusing on peacekeeping operations, where we train Mongolian forces and the other participating forces in peacekeeping role. So that is what you need to remember. Now, I'll give you one small homework, one assignment before I end the class. India and Mongolia have a bilateral military exercise. Can you find out the name of this bilateral military exercise between India and Mongolia? Please mention the answer in the comment section and let me know as to what is the name of this military exercise between India and Mongolia. On this note, I bring the session to an end. I hope it was a useful, productive session. If you like the class, do let me know through your likes, through your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.